Harbor that became quite memorable in later years.
The night of October 4th, 67 has become known as the Night of the UFOs among many UFO researchers. The Shag Harbor incident has become the best known aspect of that night.
Chris Stiles and Don Ledger have spent the past decade researching the 1967 Shag Harbor USO incident. The case, widely reported throughout Canada at the time, had been largely forgotten in subsequent years. Their 2001 book, Dark Object, reopened the case, shedding new light on the many reported USO events of that night and the weeks following.
The reason that the Shag Harbor incident came to the forefront and kind of eclipsed the importance of the other sightings from the night of the UFOs is simply the fact that it's the one case where something came down out of the sky and crashed into the water. You know, it made a noise, it made a flash. It's also unique in the sense that nobody reported a UFO. Several calls came in very quickly to the nearby Royal Canadian Mounted Police Detachment, and those reports said simply that people had seen lights or perhaps an aircraft had crashed into the waters of what they called the Sound. The interest and the concern was totally for the possibility of survivors. Nobody reported a UFO.
I'm not surprised now that I had seen something in the sky that night, because all over Nova Scotia, the night of the Shag Harbor incident, there were many UFO reports.
Just up around the bend, we'll be coming into Shag Harbor, and the site crowd gathered and watched whatever it was that happened here 38 years ago today.
Each year, Ledger and Stiles make an anniversary trip to Shag Harbor to meet with Norm Smith, one of only 3 surviving witnesses.
See the island out there? That's where it all took place, right off there. That's where we seen the light in the water.
Hey, sir. How you been?
Good.
Wow.
How are you?
Same old, isn't it?
The 3 of us stood on the lawn watching the lights. Eventually it started going, it looked like it was moving to us, and then on a downward slope towards the ground, we thought it was a plane crash. So we jumped in the vehicle in my old man's car and my uncle's, and we went up to this spot right here by the Irish Moss plant. And when we got here, there was probably 10, 12 other people. We watched the lights on the water for a period of 2 or 3 minutes, and then the lights disappeared.
What happens next is indisputable. Before midnight on Wednesday, October 4th, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers who witnessed the event from the shoreline searched the water on boats until 3 a.m. with the help of several local fishermen, including Norm Smith. At noon on Friday, October 6th, Canadian Navy divers from Halifax arrive and search the area through the weekend.
Eventually, 7 divers were dispatched from the Fleet Diving Unit in Halifax and taken down to Shag Harbor. The search effort continued through all the daylight hours of Saturday and Sunday, and by Monday morning that search was officially terminated in Ottawa. And they just simply state unidentified flying object and circle it and underline it.
According to government reports, the object travels from the south to the north along the Nova Scotia shoreline. At one point, it stops and hovers. Then at approximately 11:20 p.m., it enters the water at a 45-degree angle, 300 yards offshore.
Directly behind me where we seen the lights, right at Bomb Portage Island, directly behind me.
When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers that had responded to the call arrived at the shoreline of Old Highway number 3, the UFO was still moving upon the surface of the water. The object also appeared to be leaving a trail of dense yellow foam.
In the weeks following October 4th, the story becomes even more mysterious. The case is front-page news across Canada, and as Ledger and Stiles report in their book, in the days just prior to the Canadian military's official classification of this incident as a UFO event, a second craft enters the waters of Nova Scotia to rendezvous with the first craft.
Then this thing resumed its headway back down this way at about 4,400 miles an hour and came down through northern New Brunswick, right down over the Bay of Fundy, across the southwestern tip of Nova Scotia, across this way, and went down in the water here.
authorities already knew the object was no longer there, that it had moved under the water and had come to rest on the seabed. It sat there for almost a week, right to the hour. And after that time, it began moving under the water to the Gulf of Maine with the aid of a second craft that was helping repair it. And the two of them broke the surface of the water and flew away out over the Gulf of Maine. Interestingly enough, there is a second report of a sighting 1 week in Shag Harbor of two sets of lights, one orange, one yellow, leaving the water and flying away.
This case continues to inspire debate and continued research into the events of October 4th, 1967.
There are a large amount of primary documents that support interpreting Shag Harbor as a crash scenario of a UFO. And in one of the paragraphs it actually says a preliminary investigation has been conducted and it has been discovered that this object is not the result of a flare, float, downed aircraft, or in fact any known object.
I didn't know then, back 30-odd years ago, I didn't know whether it was a UFO or what it was. But nobody will ever make me believe that there was nothing there, because it was.
Coming up, seen for the first time, video evidence of what might possibly be a USO emerging from the waters of Laguna Cartagena in Puerto Rico.
And they are coming towards Laguna Cartagena.
And later, a University of California scientist reveals that supersonic speed by deep-sea UFOs is not only scientifically possible, but likely. A region with perhaps the longest legacy of USO activity is the area around Puerto Rico. As the mysterious southern point of the Bermuda Triangle, the island has been at the center of USO debate for decades.
Puerto Rico is a hot spot for underwater UFO activity, and it seems to match the pattern of other cases.
Puerto Rico is considered in all of the Americas to be the place where there's the greatest number of USO sightings.
Members of the Puerto Rican-based ufology group, Project Argus, agreed to lead a tour of some of the island's more notable USO-related areas. Laguna Cartagena is an isolated lake near the southwestern corner of the island. It has become linked to much of Puerto Rico's reported USO activity.
I have been conducting investigations for years in Laguna Cartagena, where there's also a lot of secrecy about USOs.
Laguna Cartagena since 1930 has been a place where hundreds of cases were reported of flying objects coming and going from the area.
October 8, 2002, approximately 9 p.m., Puerto Rican police officer and Project Argus member Carlos Torres witnesses a red glowing USO fly out of the waters of Laguna Cartagena at an incredible speed. Then it stops and hovers just above the water.
I was a witness of an object suspended over Laguna Cartagena. The military got involved because they were also witnesses. The object flew away and then back from Monte Indio. And it stopped and hovered over Laguna Cartagena.
After hovering for several minutes over the area, the object was seen to crash back into the lake. Another Argus member, Giuseppe Quiñones, believes he captured the same object on videotape in 2004.
I took a video on November 20th, 2004, in the immediate area of Laguna Cartagena.
Seen for the first time, possible video evidence of a USO near this enigmatic lake. The brightly lit craft-like object was seen emerging from the water. Here, it hovers for almost 1 minute before flying away.
In the mid-1990s, several attempts to disprove the USO activities were made, despite hundreds of witnesses that said they saw lights going in and coming out of the water. They have been seen all over Puerto Rico. Specifically, the most mentioned places are Laguna Cartagena and Route 303.
The region of Lajas, through which Route 303 runs, has been another source of significant USO and UFO reports. including a possible 1997 crash on Monte Indio that left behind a scorched earth impact zone and many unanswered questions.
In May 5, 1997, a UFO crashed there, burned many lands on the top of the mountains, and there was federals that night, and they obtained something that we don't know, a UFO.
After this 1997 incident, local government officials began to take USO and UFO reports more seriously. As a direct result, the mayor of Lajas, Puerto Rico, recently designated the roadway through the heart of Puerto Rico's UFO country as UFO Route 303. But for now, other USO-related events around the island are far more pressing for experts. In the hills around Lajas, a mysterious government aerostat, a tethered balloon-borne radar, is frequently launched up to 3 miles in the air, ostensibly to monitor air traffic and weather. However, USO researchers believe the balloon's real function is actually covert, to observe and record UFO and USO activity.
There is a government document in the legislature